Hi, I'm Tim Elmore. I'm the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders. And today on the show, we're going to have a great conversation. We're going to talk about the fact that diversity goes beyond ethnic, gender, and income diversity. The new kind of diversity is generational diversity. Today's workforce has 4 to 5 generations working together. Secondly, we're going to reveal why it's important to go beyond just tolerating other generations and really talk about leveraging those generations for the good of the mission of the organization. And lastly, I'm going to offer you some strategies for connecting with the various generations around you, both upward and downward, so you can get the very most out of each one.
Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Dr. Tim Elmore. He's the founder of Growing Leaders, an Atlanta-based nonprofit organization created to develop emerging leaders. He is a machine that has produced over 35 books. He speaks around the world. He's spoken everywhere from Coca-Cola to Stanford University to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the San Francisco Giants. He worked for 20 years alongside John Maxwell, and he has been featured on every possible media you can think of. Tim is a returning champion in that he's been on the show. I think he might hold the joint record of 3. This is his 3rd appearance. Not usual. But, every time he comes back, what he brings is enormous amounts of value. And in this new book of his, which we were talking about, and we've been talking a lot about in part 1, this book here, A New Kind of Diversity, we've been talking in the first part of the show. By the way, if you didn't catch the first part, go on back and listen. I promise you there's a lot of value in there. We talked about this generational idea. We've all been taught about diversity, the diversity, gender diversity, what's the word? Ethnicity, yep. And the diversity in ethnicity. Sorry, a little cranial flatulence there. So we've got all these different kinds of diversity, but we were talking about how every one of those ethnic groups or any one of those gender groups is kind of like it becomes a clique. And we have to break through those. We got to build bridges, not walls. And we were talking a lot about how to do that. And we're talking about how if we don't do that, we lose out. And in part 1, Tim gave us a great example about a young man who worked for a paint company, a very famous paint company, who took on his own idea, created 1 million+ followers on TikTok, and then got fired instead of being applauded,
promoted, yeah,
and promoted, and the company obviously lost out and maybe didn't even realize it. So we talked about all those kinds of things. Now we want to sort of bring it back because I want to talk about how do we bridge that gap? How do we have those conversations? Because let's be clear, leadership has changed at a skills level, social skills level, and morphed vastly over the last 40 years. Leading a team today is vastly different than it was before. And we had talked about in the first half that you've got to be able to have conversations with people who are diverse from you, whether that is cognitively diverse or any other kind of diverse. So let's talk about how do we start some of those conversations. I know you've got this idea of metaphors or images that create conversations. Help us out.
Yeah. One of the chapters in this book, A New Kind of Diversity, I talk about 6 conversations that I believe will work because they have worked. So these images that Dov just mentioned are habitudes. We call them habitudes, images that form leadership habits and attitudes. We really do believe pictures are worth 1,000 words. So you launch with an image. You don't have to use a PowerPoint screen, but one of the images is one that I've talked about. I think I mentioned it even before on the show, Dov. It's called chess and checkers. Mm-hmm. And it's basically built off of this premise. When I play the game of checkers, I pretty much treat all my pieces alike. They're the same color, they're the same shape, the same size, they move alike. I treat them all alike. When I play the game of chess, I have to know what each piece can do. A bishop is different than a knight, than a rook, than a pawn, than a king and a queen. Only in knowing the strength of each piece can I win. I think mediocre leaders play checkers with their people. They treat them all alike, and they get average performance. Great leaders do the work. Chess is more work than checkers, to find the knights and the rooks and the bishops, and they connect with others at the uniqueness of their strength and their personality. And those people flourish under the leadership. So the conversation is, are we playing chess or checkers here? And if we are, what are your superpowers? What makes you a knight? What makes you a queen, etc. So I'm being cheesy here for the sake of time, but that
it makes sense.
Yeah, it does for us. It's helped us immensely. Another big one is Pyrrhic victory. Now, Pyrrhic victory is actually Pyrrhic victory. Mm-hmm. It's named after King Pyrrhus, an ancient Greek king from centuries ago. The term Pyrrhic victory is actually in the dictionary. We just turned it into a habitude. So here's the story behind Pyrrhic victory. The ancient Greeks were fighting the ancient Romans, and it was 40,000 Greeks versus 40,000 Romans, just pounding it out. King Pyrrhus eventually brings in elephants. They bash through the wall, and they finally win the Battle of Asculum. However, when the king is he's surveying the results of the battle, dead bodies, broken swords and shields, and so forth, one of his captains comes up and says, "Congratulations, King Pyrrhus, on your victory." His response was, "One more such victory, and I shall be lost." Now, we all know what he was saying there. I may have won a battle, but I think I just lost more than I gained.
Yes.
Doesn't this happen in intergenerational conversations? Listeners, if you got a teenage son or daughter, have we not won Pyrrhic victories? We won the argument. We lost the child. We just lost them at the heart level. This can happen with young and old teammates at work. So we need to make sure we're not winning Pyrrhic victories. We need to ask ourselves questions like, what do I hope to win by winning this argument? And I think the ego question, Dov, is, why do I want to win so bad? Why would I put so much stock in this silly issue that is not like... I'll tell you a good example that I think people would appreciate. I have a dear friend that said, "Tim, I read your Pyrrhic victory habitude." He said, "I just won a Pyrrhic victory on the phone. One of our customers called us and said the shipment had not arrived on time. And I argued that we sent it on time. And we went back and forth on who, on time, not on time. He said, I was so vehement on winning the argument that we sent it out on time, and I had the number, the tracking number. Finally, the customer said, all right, thanks, bye." She hung up the phone. He felt good about winning the argument. He just lost it was not short of $1 million customer, because his ego got in the way, and he was, more intent on, he should have said, we signed it on time, but that's not the issue. We need to get something to you pronto. You know what I'm saying? So Pyrrhic victory would number 2. Let me do at least one other.
Before you do, I just want everybody to just pause for a minute. I want you to ask where you are today. At this moment in time, where are you having Pyrrhic victories?
Yeah.
As Tim said, with your kids, with your employees, where your ego is so strong that you have to be right. And maybe, as an example, thinking about our first part of the conversation, do you have a policy in place that you're vehemently attached to that is now in the way of you hiring the best people?
Wow.
Of you keeping the best people? So if you're saying we won't hire people with tattoos, how many great employees have you excluded because of that, and nobody will ever see those tattoos? Does it matter? Where you have a dress code and you've made it universal, understandably fine. But does that dress code have to apply when people are at home? Does it have to apply when people don't see clients? Get off. So I really want to challenge people to consider where you are having Pyrrhic victories, where you can go home and go, I won that fight, and then realize it's cost you everything. I really want to challenge you that. I've had those fights myself. I'm guilty of it. And I know that it sucks when I get a little bit of consciousness, when the blood flow comes back to the prefrontal cortex of my brain, and I go, oh my God, I'm such a tool. I've lost by winning. Where did you lose by winning? So I wanted to just pause it. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tim, but I think it's such an important point, particularly multi-generational. You know, because you won that battle because that old fart who's a baby boomer doesn't get it, or that entitled millennial doesn't get it. No, you didn't win. It cost you more than the win. Please pause and take that down. Ask yourself that question. Where am I having those wins? I'm sorry, Tim. I'll hand it back to you.
No, I'm glad you pushed pause on that. It's huge. It is huge. And I speak out of experience like you. I have won way too many Pyrrhic victories.
Yes.
So one other metaphor that I especially need in my life right now, and it started great conversation, is one called guard dogs or guide dogs. And here's the truth behind this one. Down through history, human beings have given canines many different service jobs, but two of the most popular ones have been the guard dog and the guide dog. So the guard dog is that dog that's in a pen of some sort with a doghouse, and their whole job is to sniff out trouble, right? They're barking at intruders. They're growling at possible trouble out there. Does this sound familiar, anybody, to a boss you might have had in the past, or maybe the way you do things? We naturally migrate to guard dog mode, especially when we're scared or we're anxious about the numbers. Guide dogs, totally different job. In fact, I remember speaking a few years back in Virginia, and the guy that spoke before me on the docket that day was completely blind, but he had a guide dog named Scout who walked him up the staircase to the platform, walked him across to the podium, sat down as he gripped the podium, this blind man. He spoke. The dog must have known the last line, because on the last line, the dog hopped up, walked him clear across the platform, walked him down the stairs. Remember, the man can't see a thing. Walked him over to a seat. And when the both of them sat down, I thought to myself, what a great leader. And I was talking about the dog, not the man.
Yeah.
Here's what I know about guide dogs. Guide dogs go first. Guide dogs are a little vulnerable because they go first. They lead the way. They see things that others cannot yet see. You follow me?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, when we are anxious, and this is an anxious time even to this day,
sure,
we naturally, our brains shift into the amygdala kicks in. We shift into fight or flight. We shift into guard dog mode. I'm going to hold my cards close to my chest. What the people desperately need from us is to be a guide dog. And that means I go first. I may be vulnerable when nobody else is yet vulnerable. And I know that's scary because nobody may lob it back. But I'm telling you, when I've done that with my team, Dov, it has been rich reciprocation. But they waited for the leader to jump in first and tip my hand and say, this is scary, isn't it? We're going to have to figure this one out together, aren't we? This is tough. But boy, at least they know you're human. And I'll stop there. But I just think this is critical. And I know this is so much what you believe and what you preach on your podcast. So be a guide dog, not a guide dog.
As you know, I'm a huge fan of vulnerability and the power of vulnerability. And the power of vulnerability is in doing that. It is in saying, you know what? Like I just did it. I took your wonderful test. Again, you can find it at newdiversitybook.com. Is that right?
Yep, that's it.
Go to newdiversitybook.com and it says, take the test. I took the test. I was pretty sure I was going to knock it out of the park. I didn't. I was disappointed with my results. That I'm telling you that as you listen to me, as you watch me right now, as a guy who speaks about these kinds of things, I go, oh, I guess I need to learn some things. I guess I need to get better at this. And if you step into your meeting with your team and you say, listen, I think I'm pretty good at this, but I probably got some blind spots that I have no idea of. that level of vulnerability gives everybody else permission. You know, I've said many times, you've heard me say this, leadership is permission. That's what leadership is. People are trying to classify it in all kinds of ways, and I can do the same. But leadership is permission. The way you show up gives permission for everybody else to show up. If you show up with the courage of vulnerability, you give them permission to do exactly the same. And that is vitally important.
Agreed. Yeah. You know, in this topic, I really do believe nearly everybody on planet Earth has generational blind spots. You mentioned the term blind spot. Yeah. I do too. And this is what I study. This is what I do when I work with organizations. But I bring them to the table. I have 2 millennial kids, 34 and 30. I learn something every time. I don't always like it, but I learn it. So, you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. You know, that's what Maxwell said. So I just want to so encourage you. I don't even know everybody listening, but I just want to encourage you, even if you don't get this book, apply yourself, find yourself a resource. This book, Dov, I designed to be an encyclopedia on this subject, a dictionary. We live in different worlds. We need different words to connect with those younger and older people, and we better learn them so we can produce what we want to produce with our organizations.
I think that's vitally important. So, you know, let's talk a little bit about Jack Welch, and I want to talk about Jack Welch because Jack Welch to me was a really interesting character who I disliked enormously in the early days of his work.
Yes.
And then I saw him at the World Business Conference in New York, and I was like, who the hell is this guy? Like, he was like, completely turned on his own ass around what he was talking about. And I was really interested in that. So let's talk about him, because I know that that's an interesting point for you. So go there.
Yeah. So some time ago, I learned about some of the right things he did. You know, he was at General Electric for years. And he, in the 1990s, when computers were relatively new on the work scene, he had a bunch of older seasoned veterans that were maybe, let's say, 60 years old that didn't want to learn to work a computer. They had their systems, they had worked, they had a notepad and a pen, and that was good enough for them. However, he had been hiring some recent graduates from MIT and, you know, Yale or whatever, and they, of course, totally got the computer. They had learned with computers. So he thought maybe a good idea would be to introduce a concept that he called reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring. Perhaps you've heard this. So reverse mentoring is where you get 2 different generations together, older and younger. And the older generation obviously has something to invest in the younger. They can share how this company works, how to succeed here. Here's some great steps to take if you want to get ahead. But then the next part of the conversation is turned completely around. And that 22, 23-year-old is pouring into the older seasoned veteran about how to better master the computer, or in that day, but today it might be, how could we leverage TikTok to market our products and services? How could we better, you know, use social media? Our social media crew is basically made up of millennials and Gen Z. And I know why. They know so much more than I do about that, you know? So I love this idea. So every week I meet with Andrew. Andrew is 30 years younger than I am. And I love what happens at every single meeting. 60 minutes together. I spend time investing in him. He'll ask questions and I'll, oh, here's what you need. He's working on a book right now. So I'm talking about this, writing the book. But then I'm sure that before the hour's over, I'm going, now, how do you do that on that keynote presentation? And he's, oh, here's what you do. You go to here. How did you know to do that? He says, how did you not know? You know, I mean, that's the kind of conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. How did you not know?
But we hug each other at the end of every meeting because we both have added value to the other. So reverse mentoring, I think, is one of the keys to making it today, because the shelf life of any skill set is getting lower and lower and lower. Back in the 1940s, a skill set would last about a decade. That was the average. You work on the conveyor belt or whatever. Nothing much changes in 10 years. Today, it's months sometimes. So because it changes so rapidly, we need to say, I'm not just a teacher, I'm a learner. And I've got some young bucks right here, young team members that can teach me a whole lot.
I think that's really great insight and a strategy that every one of us who are listening can think about. How can we do this? Like what do I have to offer that generation that is not about making them wrong? That's key, right? Because we think, I'll teach them this, but it's really, no, I'll show them how they're wrong. No, stop that. What can I share? What can I guide around without making them wrong? And what do I need to learn that I'm made not important that is? Like, there's a lot of boomers who think social skills don't matter. Emotional intelligence doesn't matter. Like, lots of them in our age bracket who are going, no, that doesn't really matter. And I'm like, okay, well, how you doing now? How's the business going? Well, these bloody millennials are getting on my nerves. Well, yeah, of course they are, because it's all social. Yeah. Let's talk about the newest group, which is Gen Z, which I think, we've had all the talk about millennials and, they're this and they're that and, hello boomer and, all that stuff that went on. Gen Z to me are very different. Yeah, and it's interesting because they're going to be a much smaller generation. They're likely to be like the Gen X's were to the boomers, and millennials will be to them, what the boomers were. So what are you seeing there? Because these people are only in their early 20s. What are you seeing there that's so different? And how can we best lead these individuals? Because I think that even, I think there's a rivalry with millennials have a rivalry with them more. And I think it's kind of a throw your hands in the air for boomers and X's with them. Like, I just don't understand these people. Help us understand it and how we can best lead them, and what's the massive opportunity in front of us that we're missing? Yeah,
great question. So the data shows the two biggest realities that you're going to see if you're a hiring manager or an employer is high anxiety and high agency. High anxiety is probably not news to you. This generation coming in brings with them the greatest degree of mental health issues. And it's not their fault. We need to stop slapping them and tell them it's all their fault. They just need to build some grit. Certainly, we all need to build grit. I do too. But we got ambushed by this smartphone. All of us, parents, employers, coaches, teachers, we got ambushed. We did not know what it would do to our mental health. And so Gen Z is coming to us with panic attacks that you may not understand, anxiety levels that are on the verge of disorders, and even depression. Kids are committing suicide at higher rates right now. And I know you're probably going, what's up wrong with these wimps? There's nothing wrong with them, except that they were raised in a day where mom and dad had no idea that having a smartphone in their hand at 13 years old was not a good idea. So I know I sound like your grandpa right now, but listen very closely. So the anxiety levels, we're going to need to do something about. If we can become a workplace that says, we do care about your mental health, and we've taken these steps for you. I'll just tell you what we do at Growing Leaders.
Thank you.
2 out of the 5 days of the week, we offer Deep Work Wednesday. So Deep Work Wednesday is a day you can work from home or wherever you want to work, but we know there's going to be some deep projects that you really need to not be interrupted on. And you need to just be able to go deep with your mind. So Deep Work Wednesday, you could say no to all the meeting requests that come your way, and you can focus on that. Now, we want to see your work, but you can work there. Friday is Remote Work Friday. You can work from anywhere you want. You can go out of town, whatever you want to. But on Friday, we just want to give you a reprieve from the routine that you typically have done. Dov, we offer unlimited PTO. I don't know that everybody needs to do that, but for us, here's what it's done. We hire people that are highly responsible so we can trust them to take that unlimited PTO rightly. But you know what that says? We trust you. We hire you and we trust you. We know that you're not going to want to let your teammates down if you take 14 days in a row and, that sort of thing. It's worked. We do. It was a little bit of a risk because we had never done this before. But for Gen Z, we are attracting young team members like crazy. We have found that for some, meaning is the new money. They want money for sure, but doing something that feel like matters and it has meaning. It's not just making widgets is huge to them. We personally mentor and coach them. All of these are love languages to Gen Z. So one more quick thought, agency. I mentioned that before.
Yes, please.
Because they've grown up with a smartphone, they have a much higher level of agency than you might expect. You might be finding an audacious young team member in an interview going, you want my job in 18 months? What are you talking about? But they are not even sure they need another human. Now I'm being facetious here because they've got Siri, Alexa, and Google. I just talked to a father that said, I'm not having the same conversations with my teenage kids that I had with my dad when I was a teenager. I said, you can thank Google, Siri, and Alexa for that one. They're asking Google questions we used to ask mom and dad. But again, I designed this book to be an encyclopedia to connect with that younger generation and to really not just keep them, but win them at the heart level. That's what we need to be after.
So, but that piece you just brought up, that piece around agency, rubs boomers, Xers, and even some millennials, older millennials, the wrong way, because it's like, who the hell do you think you are?
Yes. Yeah.
You're not there yet.
Yeah.
I'm of the belief that I don't care how much experience you've got. I care about how willing you are to learn. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you come into me and you've got 10 years experience, but you're stuck in your head and you're not willing to learn anymore, your experience is valuable. But if you've got 2 years experience and you've got a massively open mind, you're way more valuable to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they are confronted by this, this idea of agency. And I agree that, they've got Alexa and Google, et cetera, to help them along the way. But how does the leader dealing with that Gen Z who says, I want to be the head of marketing in 18 months.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, this is my first job in marketing. How do they confront that without putting them off and at the same time, not slapping them upside the head?
Couple of thoughts real quick. I would tell the employer these words: don't think control, think connect. Mm-hmm. So we want to control, as parents or employers do. We want to control that, like next day, they don't know what they're doing, So don't think control, think connect. I think control is a myth, at least a bit of a myth. I don't have control of anybody's attitude right now. But if I think connect at the heart level, an arm around the shoulder, I can coach them better. And the second thing I would offer to them is, do you remember the last time I was on your show, Dov? We talked about the paradoxes of leadership.
Yes.
And one of the paradoxes is, I think great leaders are both humble and confident, or confident and humble.
Yes.
They seem to be paradoxical, but they're not. So Cam is our newest team member. He just graduated from the university. I love his confidence. He came in really hot, like you just described, that hypothetical young team member. So we just took a trip together and I thought, this is my chance. So we're just having some good seafood. And I said, Cam, I got to tell you, I love your confidence. My gosh, you're going to go places, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, Cam, do you remember one of the paradoxes we've talked about before, confidence and humility? I said, if you want to keep going forward, and you do want to keep going forward, right? Oh, yeah. I said, if you would combine humility with this, it will just be unlimited. You'll have no ceiling. And I began to talk about it. And he pushed back. He said, well, I think I am humble, you know? And I said, well, Cam, let me tell you how you came across. So maybe you are humble. What you came across like is this. We played a little game called What's It Like to Be on the Other Side of Me? And in that game,
that's good.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you, it was enlightening. And we both, and by the way, I got honest too. I said, here's where I get overconfident. But so I guess I'm saying, let's have conversations. Don't think control, think connect. And let's have those conversations where we're mentors more than managers. Maybe that's another one. Don't think manage, think mentor. If we put the mentor hat on, I'm going to have a whole different approach to a young team member than if I just think that doggone employee isn't seeing what I see. I need to help them see what I see and want the best and want them to pass me up one day. I told Cam by the end of that conversation, I said, Cam, you get this down, I'm going to be working for you one day. We both laughed. Right. But I think that's how we need to look at Gen Z. Yeah.
And I think, you know, so we can look at across all of these things. We can look at the multi-generations. We can look at how to connect and et cetera, et cetera. And we also have to understand the complexity of human beings. And we often, you know, we talked about these stereotypes as shortcuts that the brain does. It creates those neural pathways, and we get stuck in the idea of who somebody is or what somebody is. And that even is at a very subjective level. What I mean by that is, you know, we look at, let's say, Tim, and we say, oh, well, you know, Tim, he's the leader of this organization. He's written all these books. He worked for the Maxwell organization, blah, blah, blah. Tim is this. And my response is, no, he's not. And people go, yeah, he is. And I go, I agree that that may be the majority of who he is, but what's he like when he's pissed off? Have you seen him pissed off? No. What's he like when he's frustrated?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't see that. Yeah. So you see a paradigm, you see a piece of somebody. I put a video out on Instagram last Sunday because I went to an event on Saturday. Nobody knew, including my wife, who was with me, the level of anxiety I had going into that meeting. I was invited. Now, let me say, I was invited. So I was there as probably one of the most senior people in the room of about 50 people. I was invited, and I had anxiety because I have an anxiety disorder. They spoke for the thing went on for about an hour. There was a break. And then by the time the second half had finished, I was in a full-blown panic attack.
Wow.
What did I look like? I looked like exactly the same. I looked calm. I looked cool. I looked confident. I looked all those things. But I left and my wife said, what was that? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, that's not you. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, you know, you said this and that's not how you would speak to somebody. And I know that that's not your best self. And I had to tell her I was in an anxiety attack. I was in a panic attack. And now, to be clear, I told everybody that on the Instagram thing, but I also made sure that I was accountable. And I reached out to that person and said, you know, I may have come across as an arrogant dick. Those are my words, right?
Yeah.
That was not my intention. And here's what was going on for me. And I explained myself. But it would be easy just to write me off and say, oh, well, Dov's fake because he's kind and caring and loving and compassionate, blah, blah, blah. But that's a fake because this is who he is. No, that's not who I am. Or the other side, Dov's not an anxious person because he's kind of, no, that's also who I am. People are multifaceted and we've got to be willing to take a thing back. And so this is the same thing with the generational thing. We want to look at them and say, you're an entitled millennial, as opposed to saying that conversation came across entitled, like you did with Cam. That conversation came across as lacking humility. And yes, you may believe that you are a humble person, but that's not how that came across. And I am married to the greatest gift of my life. We're celebrating 24 years married this weekend. And, you know, my wife will ask me, we have an agreement, and she never, ever says, oh, this is terrible or bad. She just simply says, is that how you wanted to come across? I know who you are.
Yeah.
I know who you aspire to be. Is that you want? I'm not asking you to change. Is that you want to come across? And that is, for me, is such a great leadership strategy. It shows
It
what a
is.
phenomenal leader she is. Because when you're sitting down with a boomer or an Xer or a millennial or a Gen Z, and you simply ask that question, tell me how you wanted to come across. And
Yeah.
here's my perception of how that came across. Is that what you want? It's like so good in what you've laid out so beautifully in this. So beautifully in this book. And I really want to encourage people to get it for that reason, because it's about, as you said right at the beginning of the conversation, let's build bridges, not walls.
Yeah.
Let's get
Yeah.
past the stereotypes. We're already at the end of our second part of this delicious conversation, Tim. Always a pleasure and an honor, sir. Thank you so much for all that you share. I want to finish by making sure that you let people know where they can find out more about you, the test, the book. But I also want to leave them with one practical piece, one thing. I know you gave us a lot in the beginning, but what's one thing that somebody can walk away and go, you know what? I can go do this in the next 5 minutes, or certainly within the next 24 hours.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mentioned in the last show the ditch the niche exercise just to find out the superpower. I want to recommend that. Find someone that's not in your niche, meaning your age group, where they have the same values, they vote the same way, they think the same way, and they're just different. And you go after them. Maybe a 22-year-old, maybe a 62-year-old in your life, but find that person. But Dov, I want to take a minute or two real quick and share this, probably the greatest parenting decision my wife and I made when our kids were growing up was this very thing. When my daughter Bethany was 13 years old, 12, 13 years old, I sat down at the table and I said, Bethany, let's pick 6 women that can be mentors for you this next year of your life. We know that year, that 13th year, in the Jewish culture, the bar mitzvah, the bat mitzvah, it's kind of a rite of passage.
Yes.
Well, so that night we picked 6 women that would be one-day mentors for our daughter Bethany, women that she thought were really cool, and women that my wife and I agreed were wonderful models, role models for working women, stay-at-home moms. I called them all up and I said, would you pick a day in the next year and let Bethany shadow you that day? We so respect the life you're living. The only thing I ask is, in the course of that day, would you share one life message with our daughter Bethany? A message you wish you would have heard when you were 13, but nobody ever shared it with you. Dov, these women went beyond my wildest imaginations. Sarah is a nurse, works in the maternity ward at the hospital. She took Bethany into the maternity ward. Our little 8th grade girl was helping women give birth to babies between 9 and 3 that day. It was crazy. Wow. And then at 3, Sarah takes her out of the maternity ward, takes her into another class where she taught a class to teenage girls, unwed mothers, about pregnancy and what to expect and so forth. Well, Bethany was sobered by that entire day. Do you know what her life message was at the end of the day over dinner? It was on handling your sexuality wisely. Well, that message got through loud and clear that particular day for a while, much better than my lecture on the subject. Well, I won't go into all of every one of these ladies had an experience and a conversation. We ended the year by having all the ladies over to our house where we had dinner together. And then Bethany set up a chair in the middle of the room. All the ladies sat around in chairs and sofa. And she read a letter to each one of these ladies. Dear Miss Sarah, this is what I learned from you. This is how my life changed. Dear Miss Betsy, dear Miss Sandra, this is what I learned from you. Well, there's tears coming down their cheeks, and they're whispering things back to her. And then I tried to explain what rite of passage means, but I was an emotional father at that point. That's right. All the ladies got up from their sofa and chairs, knelt down on the carpet, and looking up at our little girl, just began to speak words of blessing. Bethany, you're going to be a great leader one day. I can see it. You're going to be a great wife if you choose to be. Oh, you can be a great mother if you choose to be. Oh my goodness. It was a dream. I watched my daughter that year go from thermometer to thermostat with her friends. Her influence in turning up the temperature was there. But here's the reason I'm sharing this is that was an illustration of older generations getting with younger generations and just investing. And now Bethany's given back to some of their kids. So it's just reciprocating. So I leave that as an idea for folks. We've got to get these generations together. And this book, again, is I'm trying to make it an encyclopedia on how to do this kind of thing for anybody. So thank you for the gift of being on your show, Dov. I so appreciate you. I've already told you that, but thank you for letting me be on your show.
I really appreciate you being here, and I really appreciate what you just shared, that piece there at the end. There's so much to be learned in that. Like, what if you, like, as you listen to this, as you watch this show, what if you picked people out of your team and said, okay, pick 3 mentors from this organization who are, and one of whom has to be much older than you, one of whom has to be much younger than you, and the other one you can choose yourself. And I wonder what would transform just about everything. So that was such a powerful, powerful story, Tim. Thank you so much. It is always a pleasure and honor, sir. Thank you for being with us. Again, please tell everybody where they can find out more about you, about the book.
Sure. Well, our organization is growingleaders.com, but the book with a free assessment can be found at newdiversitybook.com. All one word, newdiversitybook.com. And there's bonus material and the QR code for the assessment. I hope it's enjoyable to you. And again, Dov, I love you, buddy. Thanks for letting me be with you for this period of time.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure and honor. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Remember, those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of the tribe. Whether you're a business leader or a political leader committed to positively shaping the landscape, you can tap in to what drives human behavior by understanding the emotional source code. I'm Dov Barron, and I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified, actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about all the things that you can learn from the other generations. It's time to give up the ageist, the generational ghettos. Let's build bridges, not walls. Let's embrace the diversity of generations. There's something to learn in it for every single one of us. Be that bridge builder. Get a hold of the book and read it and put it into action. I'm Dov Barron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.